And in Texas, one of the most restrictive voting bills has stalled for now. In a move late Sunday night, state Democrats walked off the House floor to block Republicans from pushing the controversial bill forward. It comes as other Republican-led states do the same in the aftermath of former President Trump's election loss and his repeated baseless accusations of widespread fraud. Christina Ruffini reports.
This bill,
in a dramatic late-night maneuver, Democrats blocked the vote on Texas Senate Bill 7 just before its midnight deadline.
We killed that bill.
And railed against last-minute provisions added to the bill behind closed doors, including making it easier for judges to throw out election results based on the allegation of fraud. The bill is one of the most restrictive in the country. It bans drive-through and 24-hour voting, makes it illegal for counties to send unsolicited absentee ballots, adds new ID requirements for those ballots, and limits polling hours, even during early voting, delaying the start until 1 p.m. on Sundays, a time that Democrats argue specifically targets after-church voter drives in African-American communities.
Souls to the polls is sacred. Republicans were determined to take that away.
Meanwhile, drive-through and 24-hour voting, popular with minority communities, were used for the first time last year in Harris County, which includes increasingly diverse Houston, where President Biden won by 13 points. Republicans say the legislation is necessary to protect the integrity of the voting system, even though there were no major instances of fraud reported in Texas in the last election.
This may be more of an optics issue, restoring confidence with the American people. And in my state, you actually do believe there was tremendous fraud.
And Christina joining me now live from Washington. Christina, we've repeatedly heard that defense from Republicans and people believing there was voter fraud in 2020. In pushing this bill, were any Texas Republicans or supporters able to cite evidence of widespread fraud?
Well, I think there's a bit of a circular argument about what actual evidence is. The important thing to think about is the fact that Republicans hold a supermajority in both Texas state legislatures. They have the House and the Senate. They have the governor, and they retained all of their House seats that were up for a vote in 2020. So if there was widespread fraud, logic shows it would have gone in their favor. There haven't been what we would, with this allegations of such widespread fraud, we would expect there to be cases, right? We would expect people to be prosecuted for this if it was able to be proven. That's not something we've seen in Texas or any of the other states en masse, widespread allegations that would have altered the outcome of the election. And again, Republicans did really well in that election. So there is a bit of an irony here in them saying that we need to do this to protect the integrity of the vote, a vote which they mostly won.
And Christina, what happens next with this bill, and how does it compare to other states who have passed or are trying to change their voting laws?
It goes in step with its predecessors, right? We've seen this in Florida, we've seen this in Georgia. We are hearing from small businesses, from large businesses in Texas that are concerned about this because they're worried about backlashes with larger corporations like we saw in those other states. But this is really driven by these Republican voters, especially Trump voters, who want to believe that there was some sort of malfeasance in the last election, and that's why they lost, right? They just refuse to believe that the president could have lost on the merits. Time and time again, we've said that's not true. Time and time again, there has been no real evidence of widespread fraud, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't seem to matter to these people. As you heard Republican Mike McCall from Texas say, it's about the optics. Someone else said this morning that it's a solution in search of a problem, but regardless, it seems to be popular with the voter base. Look, the midterms are coming up next year. This is all about re-election and appealing to what people think they want, and that seems to be voter reform in a state where voter fraud doesn't really seem to be a big issue.
Meanwhile, President Biden originally set a self-imposed Memorial Day deadline to reach an agreement on a bipartisan infrastructure package, but that will not be met today. So where do negotiations stand at this point?
They're ongoing, but we're getting the sense that there's a clock on this. The rhetoric from Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg from the White House seems to be, okay, we're working on it, but, you know, they're losing a little bit of patience. However, they still are negotiating. The head of the Republican negotiating team, Shelley Moore Capito, said this weekend that she believes negotiations are going well, that she says the White House is negotiating in good faith. They're going to continue for the time being. However, the two parties are still really far apart, not just on the numbers, but about the definition of what counts as infrastructure infrastructure, right? Republicans want to think of it as something you can hit with a hammer, right? Bridges, rail, trains, train stations, all of this. The president and the White House argues that infrastructure also needs to include these social safety nets that help prop up the population so they can take advantage of all the other things, and so that our economy is more resilient the next time it's tested in something like a pandemic. So more than just the numbers, they're going to have to find some sort of theoretical agreement on what the definition of infrastructure really is if they hope to come up with a compromise bill. And to be honest, that seems unlikely, even if they're negotiating in good faith.
We will be watching. Christina Ruffini, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.